Soulcaster.
The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the pleasant, comforting kind. No birdsong through the kitchen window. No soft clinking of porcelain as I poured hot water into my mug. Just silence. Heavy, dense. Like the air had thickened and forgotten how to carry sound. That should have been my first warning. But instead, I smiled at the neat little tea bag bobbing in my cup and hummed some half-remembered tune from the 70s while Julia vacuumed the hallway. It was our third time meeting. She was young, polite, maybe 22 at most. Said she'd just moved back in with her mum after a rough breakup. I liked her because she didn't ask too many questions, didn't prod when I mentioned Paul, just nodded and dusted around the framed photos like they were sacred. I was rinsing a spoon when I heard her voice. Quiet. Off. The kind of quiet where you know someone doesn't want to be overheard. "Mrs. Dalrymple," she said, just above a whisper. Is anyone else supposed to be here?" I didn't turn right away. My mind was still in its own soft fog. I'd just been thinking about whether to prune the hydrangeas today. "No. Why?" She didn't respond for a second. Then, almost inaudibly, "There's a woman upstairs." The spoon slipped from my fingers and clanged into the sink. Every hair on my arms stood straight up. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice suddenly foreign in my throat. "I saw her," Julia whispered. "Through the cracked door at the end of the hall. I thought maybe you had a guest, but she just stood there." The blood drained from my face. That room, the one at the end of the hall. The door had been locked since the funeral. "Get out," I said, barely breathing. "Julia, get out of the house. Right now. Take your keys and leave. Do not go upstairs." She obeyed instantly. I heard the front door click behind her a moment later. I dropped my tea, hands trembling so badly I could barely unlock my phone. My finger slipped twice before I got 911 to ring. "There's someone in my house," I said. "A woman. She's upstairs. I'm alone. I've been alone for over a year, and someone is in my house." Dispatch said someone would be there in 5 minutes. I sat on the front steps, coatless, still in my slippers, and watched the driveway like a hawk. The wind had picked up, and for a second I wondered if maybe it had been the curtain Julia saw. Maybe the breeze had caught it just right, and— But no, that door was locked. I locked it myself. I hadn't stepped foot in that room since I folded Paul's last cardigan and laid it on the bed, 12 days after the funeral. The police arrived, 2 officers, polite but mildly skeptical until they saw my hands shaking. They did a full sweep, room by room, closet by closet, even the crawl space. "Nothing," Officer Rivas said. "No signs of forced entry. All windows secure. Back doors bolted. You sure you didn't— maybe imagine it?" "I didn't see her," I said. "Julia did." "Maybe your cleaner has a flair for the dramatic." "She doesn't. And she's not the kind to make a scene." I paused. "Can you check the upstairs bedroom? The one at the end of the hall?" They looked at each other. "That door's locked, Mom." "I know. I locked it. Can you open it anyway?" They did. No prints on the knob. Nothing out of place. Just dust, stale air, and the same stale grief that hit me every time I stood in that doorway. Paul's old slippers were still tucked under the bed, his book still resting on the nightstand, letters to a young poet, with a receipt from our last vacation sticking out as a bookmark. Rivas stepped out first. "Place is clean. No woman. No signs anyone's been here but you." I nodded, gave a brittle little laugh. "Of course. Sorry to waste your time." But I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the floorboards sent a fresh jolt through my spine. I left the light on in the hallway, sat up in bed like a child, watching shadows shift across the ceiling. I told myself it was grief, isolation, stress. But deep down, I knew something had changed. That room wasn't empty, and I wasn't alone. By the way, if you're still reading and haven't hit follow yet, please do. More than 99% of listeners forget to, and it really helps us keep going. Plus, you won't want to miss what comes next. The next morning, I called Julia. I wanted to tell her the police found nothing, that it was probably just a trick of the light, or a curtain, or something. But her number went straight to voicemail. No greeting, just her voice. Flat. Please don't contact me again. Then a beep, and silence. I told myself I wouldn't go up there again, not for anything. That was the pact I made with myself after the funeral. Leave it as it was. Preserve it. Like a mausoleum for a life that used to make sense. But the moment the officers left and the door clicked shut behind them, I was already halfway up the stairs, gripping the banister like it might break off in my hand. The lock on the upstairs door was untouched, the old brass knob still stiff in the way it always was, the key exactly where I left it, on a nail inside the linen closet. I stared at it for what felt like forever, just wood and metal. And yet my fingers refused to move. What did she see? I hadn't asked Julia for specifics, not really. I was too busy trying to hold my voice steady on the phone, but her words stuck. A woman upstairs. When I finally worked up the nerve, I turned the key. The door opened with a groan, same as always, and everything was undisturbed, just like I left it. The bed was still made, the sheets tight at the corners like Paul liked them. His old slippers, a size too big for most men his age, still rested neatly at the foot. A faint trace of his cologne, woodsy, medicinal, lingered like a scent memory carved into the wallpaper. But no signs of a woman, no long grey hairs on the pillow, no footprints in the dust, just silence. And yet I felt it. That presence, like walking into a room mid-conversation, only to find no one there. I went over everything. Closet, untouched. Dresser, closed. Window, locked from the inside. And yet when I looked at the mirror above the vanity, I swear, for half a second, I expected to see someone standing behind me. I walked out, locked the door, put the key back. That night, I reheated some soup and let the TV babble nonsense while I sat motionless, bowl in my lap, spoon untouched. My phone buzzed, my daughter Jen, texting some article about retirement scams and reminding me, again, to update my passwords. I almost told her, but what would I even say? Hey, sweetheart. A strange woman may or may not be living in the sealed tomb of your father's belongings. Sleep tight. No, I'd sound unhinged. Instead, I typed, "Thanks, will do," and turned off the screen. The wind picked up again around 11. The same uneasy silence from the morning had returned. No cars, no dogs, not even the rhythmic tick of the old clock in the hallway. Like the whole house was holding its breath. Then, the footsteps, soft, rhythmic, measured, not the house settling, not the pipes, real, upstairs. I sat up in bed, holding my breath. And there they were again, 3 slow steps, a pause. Another. I wanted to move, to scream, to call someone, but I couldn't. My arms wouldn't lift, my voice wouldn't obey. I lay frozen, staring at the ceiling like it might crack open. then silence. I waited until dawn. When I finally made it upstairs, again, the door was still locked. Nothing inside was touched. But the hallway rug, the one just outside the door, had shifted. Only a little, maybe an inch, like someone had stepped on it while turning. I realigned it and backed away. I'm not a superstitious woman. I'm not one for ghost stories or haunted house nonsense. But something about this was different. I decided to call Julia, apologize maybe, ask her to come by, see it again in daylight, talk it through. But her number was disconnected. No voicemail, no forwarding message, nothing. That night I dreamed of her, the woman Julia saw. Except this time, she wasn't behind the door. She was sitting on Paul's side of the bed, her pale hands folded neatly in her lap. Just waiting. And when she turned to look at me, her eyes were the same color as his. I don't remember falling asleep that night. One moment I was staring at the ceiling, willing the silence to stay still, and the next I was waking to morning light filtering through the curtains like nothing had happened. My neck ached from sleeping too stiffly. My hands still clenched the edge of the blanket, as if even in sleep I was bracing for something to burst through the door. I did what I always do. Routine makes things feel less like chaos. Brushed my teeth, made toast, let the cat out, even though I haven't had a cat in 4 years. It's just habit now, opening that door, closing it, moving like life hasn't changed. But the moment I turned to head upstairs to get the laundry basket, I stopped. The door. The upstairs door, the one I locked, relocked, checked twice, was standing wide open. Not cracked, not ajar. Open. A chill spread through my back, like someone had trailed a wet finger down my spine. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, frozen, heart pounding in that slow, heavy way where you feel each beat like a punch behind your ribs. I didn't call the police this time. Something in me already knew they wouldn't find anything. No forced entry, no stranger in the closet, no prints, no footprints, no real threat. And maybe it was pride, maybe fear of sounding unhinged. But this time, I went up alone. The air smelled different. The room didn't reek of dust and time like it always did. No stale grief, no stillness. It smelled faintly of lavender. Paul's side of the bed was neatly made, the blanket tucked at the corners the way he used to do himself when he didn't trust the housekeeper to get it tight enough. His pillow fluffed. The dresser was dusted, actually wiped clean. There was a faint smear, like someone had cleaned with their sleeve, not a cloth. My mouth went dry, and then I saw it. The photograph on the nightstand. Normally it faced outward. Paul, in his mid-30s, in a suit I never saw him wear, standing beside a silver convertible we never owned. One of those weird midlife mementos he kept, I always assumed. But now it was face down. I hesitated, then picked it up. Not just Paul. A woman stood next to him. She wasn't me. Tall, dark hair, laughing at something off camera. Paul had his arm around her waist. Too comfortably, too familiarly. He looked happy, a version of him I never saw, not in any of our 32 years together. There was a scrawl on the back. Summer 83 Silver Lake, G. My hands trembled. I searched the dresser drawers. I didn't know what I was looking for. Proof, maybe, or reassurance that I hadn't gone mad. Most were filled with old cologne bottles, yellowed undershirts, ticket stubs from shows I don't remember attending. But in the back, behind a hardback copy of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, I found something. A small bundle of letters, tied with green string, brittle at the edges, the paper faded like it had been handled too many times. Beneath them, a thin manila envelope, the flap creased from being opened again and again. Inside, a birth certificate. Name, Lillian Grace Adler. Mother, Grace Holloway. Father, Paul Emery Dalrymple. I sat on the edge of the bed, the room suddenly too loud with the sound of my own breath. It felt like someone had pulled a rug from beneath the life I thought I knew. Paul had a daughter, a woman named Grace. Maybe the same woman in the photo. Maybe not. I didn't know. But it meant one thing, definitively. He lied. Not just omissions, not the small marital fictions couples allow each other over time. This was something else, something intentional, structural. My husband had an entire life I knew nothing about. I took the letters downstairs, made tea with shaking hands, and sat at the dining table like I was preparing to read someone else's diary. The first letter began formally, "Dear Paul," and quickly descended into something almost feral. Love and fury all in one breath. Mentions of promises, of what we built, of the house. I looked around me. This house. The second letter was gentler. The third, full of accusations. "You said you'd leave her," one line read. "You said this place was ours." I read them all, some dated as far back as 1982, some postmarked from only a few towns over. One from a return address I recognized, Sutterfield, less than 30 miles north. And that's when I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. Whatever was happening, ghost, hallucination, or something worse, was tied to Paul, to Grace, to this house, and maybe to me. I read them all, every brittle, yellowing page, some folded so many times the creases had nearly torn through the words. Others barely opened, as if he'd read them once and shoved them away, ashamed, or worse, indifferent. They weren't just love letters. They were history, a timeline of secrets layered between the life Paul gave me and the one he apparently kept hidden like a second skin. The first was dated June 1981. "Still think about Silver Lake. You burned the eggs, and I laughed so hard I couldn't breathe. You kissed me with toothpaste on your lips. I still dream about it." Paul would have been in his early 30s then. We hadn't even met yet. That was the year he moved to Chicago. At least, that's what he always told me. Said he hated the humidity, loved the jazz bars. Not once did he mention a woman named Grace, or a weekend at Silver Lake, or anything that sounded remotely like this. The letters kept going, spanning years, then decades. Some were joyful, almost giddy, with doodles in the margins, hearts, flowers, initials in loops. But they darkened as time went on. The tone turned brittle, demanding, bitter. "You think just because you bought her a ring, it erases us." I waited, Paul. I turned down a job in Maine because you said this place would be ours." That word came up again and again. Ours. And then one line that stopped me cold. "You promised me this house. You said it was ours." Not a house. This house. I stared around the room like I'd never seen it before. The worn floorboards, the crack in the ceiling Paul never got around to fixing, the sun-bleached sofa he swore was too comfortable to replace. All suddenly suspect. All potential artifacts from a life that may have started with her, not me. Had he built this house for Grace? Had I just inherited it by default? Like a mistress who got promoted after the wife got tired of waiting? I pulled another envelope from the stack and scanned the return address. It was the third or fourth one from a place called Sutterfield, tiny town, north of here. Population couldn't be more than a few thousand. The kind of place with one grocery store and a mayor who also runs the gas station. Grace Holloway. No apartment number. Just a street name and a little scribbled C.O. Adler. Adler. That name again. Lillian Grace Adler. The birth certificate. A daughter. Paul's daughter. I didn't know what scared me more. The possibility that she was real and out there, or the idea that she was already here, in this house, upstairs. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do again. I wrote a letter, not an email, not a text, not a Facebook message through gritted teeth. A real letter, in my stiff cursive, on proper stationery. I didn't even know if the address was still valid, but I had to try. I kept it short, polite, cold, almost. Dear Grace, I came across some of your correspondence with Paul. I believe we have things to discuss. If you are willing, please write me back. No phone calls. I'd prefer to keep this quiet. Margaret Dalrymple. I didn't reread it. I sealed it, stamped it, and drove to the next town over just to mail it from a different post office. I told myself it was to avoid the nosy postal clerk at the corner store. But truthfully, I think I just didn't want that letter coming back to my house. When I got home, I checked the upstairs lock again. Still locked, still undisturbed. But later that night, while I sat in bed watching an old crime documentary I'd seen 5 times before, the screen flashed for a split second. Not the show, my security system. The camera I'd installed in the hallway after Julia quit. I rewound. There. At 2:13 a.m., a flicker, like something passed in front of the lens, just a blur of white and grey, too fast to make out. No figure, no face. But when I paused it, I caught one single frame. The edge of a white gown, a shadow of hair, and the unmistakable shape of a hand reaching toward the doorknob. It arrived in a pale blue envelope with no return address. The kind of stationery people use when they're trying to appear gentle, harmless, soft-edged. But I recognized the handwriting before I even opened it. Tight cursive, too neat to be casual, looped just slightly to the right. I'd seen it 100 times over the past few days, in the margins of angry love letters and birth certificates tucked behind my husband's false drawers. Grace. I sat down at the dining table. The sun was too bright through the window, like it was mocking the moment. I didn't breathe until the envelope was open. 3 sentences. That's all it took to punch the air out of the room. Paul's promises don't die with him. I will not be erased. I'm closer than you think. No greeting, no sign-off, just that. I read it again, and then I burned it over the sink, watching the edges curl black, wondering if fire could destroy intent. I didn't sleep that night. My ears stayed tuned to every groan in the walls, every distant car, every creak of wood as the house settled into the dark. I used to find comfort in this place, the old bones of it, the soft corners, the smell of cinnamon in the cabinets and dust in the curtains. Now, it felt like I was squatting inside a lie. The next day, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from an unknown number. Julia. Her voice was brittle, rushed. Mrs. Dalrymple, I'm sorry. I can't come back. I tried to shake it off, but I keep dreaming about her. And last night I woke up and I swear I saw her standing outside my window. I live on the 3rd floor. I don't feel safe there. Please don't call me. I need to move on. Click. I don't remember sitting down. But suddenly I was on the floor, my knees pressing hard into the tile. The voicemail echoed in my ears. I don't feel safe there. Neither did I. That same afternoon, I called a locksmith. Had every single lock in the house changed? Doors, windows, the garage, even the basement, which no one but Paul ever went into. I installed 2 more cameras inside, one in the hallway outside the bedroom, one facing the back garden. The man who came to do it asked if I wanted motion alerts set up. I said yes before he finished the sentence. By dusk, the house was sealed like a bunker. But it didn't help. Not really. Because what I feared wasn't just someone breaking in. It was the idea that they were already inside, that someone knew this place better than I did, that it had never fully been mine. That night, I went looking for reassurance. I pulled Paul's will out from the drawer in the study, the official one. Not the envelope I found in the heating vent. That one was unsigned, and according to the lawyer, basically a love letter to myself. This one was notarized, witnessed, legal. I read it slowly. He left me the car, his savings, the antique watch he never wore but kept polished in a velvet box. But the house? No mention. Not one word about the house. I felt a tightening in my chest. Not grief, not heartbreak. Dread, cold and meticulous. I pulled out the deed, a simple sheet of paper, nothing dramatic, just a name. His name. Paul Emery Dalrymple. No and Margaret. No joint ownership. No transfer. Nothing. My lawyer hadn't caught it. Or maybe he had and just assumed it was a formality, one of those things married couples often overlooked. But it wasn't a formality now. Now it was a weapon. I sat there, gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. If Grace had letters, ones that promised her the house, and if she had evidence of Paul as the father of her child, and if the house had never legally passed to me, then she could claim it. She could take everything. That night, I stood at the foot of the stairs, staring up into the darkness. The hallway light flickered once. I hadn't noticed it doing that before. And just as I was about to turn away, something shifted. The upstairs bedroom door, the one I had just locked after the locksmith finished, was open again. Not wide this time, just an inch. Just enough to remind me, this house might not be mine. Not entirely. Not anymore. The knock came on a Sunday morning, soft but deliberate, 3 evenly spaced taps that didn't sound like a delivery or a neighbour. The kind of knock people give when they already know you're home. I was still in my robe, hair unbrushed, halfway through folding towels when it started. For a full minute, I just stood there, heart ticking loud in my chest. Then the second set came. 3 more. Firm. Patient. When I finally opened the door, the light behind her almost blinded me. She was tall, maybe my age, maybe older. It was hard to tell because her posture was perfect, her face smooth except for the thin lines that came from a lifetime of smirking at things other people didn't find funny. Her hair was silver grey, long enough to brush her shoulders, the kind of colour that didn't come from a salon. "You must be Margaret." It wasn't a question. For a moment I thought maybe she was from the church or the HOA or some local charity trying to guilt me into another donation. But then I saw her eyes, pale blue, unnervingly familiar. And before I could even ask, she smiled in a way that made my stomach drop. "I'm Grace." The air went still. She took a small step forward, like we were about to have tea on the porch, like this was normal, like we hadn't been sending ghostly threats through the mail. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the doorway. "No," I said. My voice came out thin. She tilted her head, studying me, and for one dizzy second I understood why Paul must have loved her. There was something magnetic about her, dangerous but elegant, like a violin string pulled just before it snaps. "This house," she said, running her fingers lightly along the porch railing, "was mine before it was yours. Paul built it for me." I didn't respond. Couldn't. My tongue felt like sandpaper. She glanced past me, her gaze moving into the hallway, pausing on the framed photo of Paul that hung above the stairs. "He promised me we'd grow old here. He said the light in the master bedroom was perfect in the mornings. I used to picture the way it would fall on our faces." She smiled faintly, but her eyes stayed fixed on the photograph. "I see you've kept it much the same." Something about that phrasing, "you've kept it," as though I were a caretaker and not an owner, sent a wave of nausea through me. "I think you should go," I managed. But she didn't. She just kept speaking, calm and precise, each word polished like it had been rehearsed for years. "You can change the locks, you can paint the walls, you can even burn what's left of him," she said softly. "But you'll still feel me here, whether you want to or not." The wind picked up then, scattering a few leaves across the porch. She brushed one off her coat like it offended her. "I'm not here to fight you, Margaret. I just thought you should finally meet the woman who was promised your life." And before I could reply, she turned and walked down the path. No raised voice, no threats, just quiet certainty, like she'd already won something I didn't know I was losing. I stood there for a long time, gripping the edge of the doorframe, watching her disappear down the road until she became a shimmer in the distance. My whole body felt wrong, too light, too heavy, too exposed. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender again. Not the kind from my candles, the same scent that had haunted Paul's old room weeks before. I checked the lock on the upstairs door. It was closed, secure. But the rug in front of it had shifted slightly, just enough that I knew someone, or something, had crossed that threshold while I was downstairs. When I pressed my palm against the wood, it was warm. The lawyer's office smelled like lemon cleaner and something metallic underneath, like old paper clips left too long in a drawer. He was a small, serious man in an outdated pinstripe suit, with a voice that never quite rose above the hum of the ceiling fan. I'd brought everything in a zippered pouch: Paul's will, the birth certificate, the unsigned revised copy I'd found in the heating vent, the photo, a few of Grace's letters, the less deranged ones. He sifted through the papers with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd been doing this too long to be shocked by much. "So, let's start with the basics," he said, flipping through the documents. "The house deed is still under Paul's name, purchased in 1986. That's 4 years before your marriage." "I know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He always said he'd change it. He just never got around to it." The lawyer nodded like he'd heard that before. "Was there ever a quitclaim deed? Something transferring it to you?" "No." He leaned back, tapping a pen against his lip. "Technically, upon death, the house should have passed to his legal heir, but if there's no mention of it in the will, there isn't. Then unless you can prove intent to transfer," he tapped the unsigned will, "you're in murky waters, especially if someone else has documentation, letters, promises." "She has both," I said. "Grace. She's real, and she thinks this house belongs to her." He blinked. "Grace?" "My husband's previous partner, mother of his daughter. Possibly. It's complicated. He sighed. If she can establish a long-term relationship with Paul, especially if she has letters referencing the house, there's a chance she could initiate a claim. It might not win, but she could tie you up in court. Worst case, force a settlement. So you're saying I could lose the house? I'm saying don't underestimate her. Emotional history makes people persistent, and the law isn't always fair, especially when paperwork gets messy. He slid the unsigned will back toward me. This could help, but it's weak. He never signed it. No witnesses. Intent is hard to prove without action. I walked out of that office feeling like someone had erased the ground beneath me and forgot to replace it. I had been here for decades. I hosted holidays in this kitchen, painted the damn shutters myself when Paul's back went out. I buried a marriage in these walls. And now, suddenly, I might be a squatter in my own life. The wind was sharp when I got home, colder than it had been in days. My keys were already in my hand as I approached the porch, then stopped. The front door was open, not flung wide, just ajar. 2 inches, enough to say someone didn't care if you noticed. I stood motionless for 10 seconds, then 15, waiting to hear a voice, a shuffle, anything. Nothing. I pushed it open with the tip of my boot, holding my breath. Inside was still, too still. No broken windows, no signs of a struggle. But the air had shifted, that lavender scent again, stronger now, almost cloying. I walked room by room. Kitchen, untouched. Living room, fine. Bathroom, mirror slightly tilted, like someone had leaned in close. My breath tightened as I climbed the stairs. At the top, I saw it. Paul's bedroom door, closed earlier that morning, was now wide open. I stepped inside. The bed was made, flawlessly, like something out of a hotel. But right in the center, laid out like a centerpiece, was one of Grace's letters. Unfolded, purposefully placed. I didn't need to read the whole thing. The words that mattered were written in bold strokes across the bottom. You are the guest here. My knees gave, just a little. Not enough to fall, but enough to feel the tilt. The message wasn't subtle anymore. This wasn't about memory or grief or secrets. This was a siege. She wasn't trying to haunt me. She was trying to reclaim what she thought was hers. And the terrifying part, the law just might let her. It started with a drawer that wouldn't close. I was in the garage, rummaging through Paul's old filing cabinet, the rusted one we always said we'd replace but never did because it had character. Most of the folders inside were useless. Receipts from car repairs in the 90s, user manuals for appliances we no longer owned, a folder labeled Taxes, 1997-2003, Do Not Touch, which I immediately touched and regretted. But when I tried to shove it shut again, the bottom drawer jammed like something had slipped behind it. I crouched down and yanked the drawer out completely. And that's when I saw it. Behind the cabinet, wedged into the heating vent on the wall, a manila envelope, flattened, like it had been deliberately hidden, not dropped. I reached through the dust and spiderwebs with shaking hands. The envelope was thick with moisture, the edges curled, but it was sealed. No label. I carried it inside like it might detonate. At the dining table, I peeled it open slowly. Inside, a revised will, typed, clean. Dated July 2003, 13 years after our wedding. Paul's name. My name. Clear language. I leave the property located at 1435 Wildwood Lane to my wife, Margaret Elaine Dalrymple, in full and unencumbered possession. No signature, But it was something. A draft, maybe. But one that said he meant to give me this house. Not just to keep it in his name for tax reasons, not to preserve some twisted secret from his past. He wanted me to have it. He just never got around to signing the damn thing. Or maybe he was afraid to. I held it like it was a map out of purgatory. I called the lawyer before I could lose my nerve. He didn't answer, but I left a voicemail. Told him I'd found a revised version of the will, post-marriage, that it named me as the inheritor of the property. It's unsigned, I admitted, but it's something, isn't it? When he called back an hour later, his voice was careful. It could help, he said. It won't win you the case on its own, but it paints a picture. It shows intention. If we can pair it with other evidence, maybe witness testimony, maybe something in his financial records, we might build enough pressure to keep her from escalating. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat in silence. Paul had left me a house with no keys, no foundation, and no safety net. Just paper. Words. A draft of something that should have been certain. I wanted to scream at him, shake his ghost and ask why. Why build a life with me if he was always going to leave the door cracked for someone else to walk through? By nightfall, my hands couldn't stop trembling. The heating had kicked on too early. The vents rattled like something was crawling through them. I turned off all the lights and lit a fire in the hearth. The first we'd had in years. The flame caught quickly, licking at the kindling with greedy, bright fingers. I opened my drawer and took out the copies I'd made of Grace's letters, the ones I'd brought to the lawyer but hadn't included in the final stack. There were 13 in total, some short, some pages long, some full of love, others full of venom. I fed them to the fire, one by one. Her handwriting blistered and curled, her threats blackened into ash. "You are the guest here," one had said. Fine. Then let the guest book burn. The last letter smouldered longer than the rest. The paper was heavier, thicker. The ink turned into tiny shadows as it crisped, like the words were fighting to stay behind. I watched until every trace of her disappeared. That night, the house felt different, not safer, but quieter, like it was listening, waiting. I left the upstairs door open, not out of recklessness, out of defiance. If Grace wanted to haunt me, she'd have to do it in daylight now. I wasn't going to tiptoe around someone else's grief anymore. I had enough of my own, and I was done making room for hers. She came back on a Tuesday. Not that days meant anything anymore. I hadn't slept through the night in over a week, not since the fire, not since I watched her words burn one by one, thick smoke curling up into the flue like her breath leaving this house for good. But it didn't matter. She still came back. I was pruning the hydrangeas in the front garden, shears in one hand, mug of cold coffee in the other, when I saw her shadow stretch across the lawn. She didn't knock this time, didn't wait at the bottom step like before, just strolled right up the walkway like someone returning to claim luggage the airline had misplaced. Grace. Same silver hair, same precise posture. But the softness in her face was gone. No more thin smiles, no more calm declarations. Her mouth was tight now, jaw clenched like she was tasting rust. Eyes like chipped glass. "You think a few ashes will change what this place is?" she said, voice cutting clean through the still morning air. "You think burning letters rewrites history?" I didn't answer right away. I placed the shears down carefully beside the porch rail, straightened my spine. "No," I said. "But they stopped letting you write it." That struck something in her. Her nostrils flared, her fingers twitching like they didn't know whether to slap me or shove me aside. She stepped closer. He promised me this house. He built it for me. No, I said. He started it for you. He finished it with me. Lies. Truth you don't like is still truth. Her eyes darted to the front door. You don't belong here. I've belonged here every day for 32 years. I scrubbed these floors, painted these walls, buried a dog under that maple out back, and held Paul's hand while he died in the den. That's not just ownership. That's residence. And I'm done living like a ghost in my own home. She moved toward the porch, not fast, but with intent. I stepped in front of the door, blocking her path. Move. No. Her arm shot forward, sharp, sudden, and for a moment I saw what Paul must have seen in her all those years ago. Fire. That old kind that scorches and seduces in the same breath. But this time, I didn't back down. Her fingers curled into the front of my sweater, trying to push past. I shoved her arm away. She lunged again, this time harder. We collided. Not a graceful thing, not the kind of polished drama you see in courtroom shows. It was ugly, gasping, two aging women grappling in the narrow entryway of a house full of ghosts. I grabbed her wrist, twisted, not to hurt, but to stop her. She kicked at the door behind me, tried to muscle past. I held her back with everything I had, body shaking with the exertion. From across the street, a car honked, then tires screeched. I didn't realize we'd drawn an audience until I heard the neighbor shouting. Frank, from 2 doors down, still in his slippers, waving his phone. She attacked her. I saw it. She's been here before. Within minutes, the red and blue lights painted my porch in flickering judgment. The police arrived, same officer as before, Rivas, this time not so skeptical. They pulled Grace off me, gently but firmly. I didn't need to say anything. The ripped collar of my sweater, the scratches blooming pink on my neck, the door still swinging from the force of the scuffle. All of it told the story. She was breathing heavy, hair wild. That composure from earlier cracked clean in two. Rivas held up his hand. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to leave the premises. She has no right. If you return, you'll be arrested. You've been warned. That's a matter of record now. Grace looked at me then, not with hate, but something worse. Pity. Don't you see? She whispered. This place doesn't love you. It's still full of him. It always will be. I met her gaze. Then let it be. I'll learn to live with his ghosts. But you don't get to be one of them. They led her down the steps. She didn't fight, didn't scream, just walked back to her car like a woman who finally realized the front door would never open for her again. As the cruiser pulled away, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Hair a mess, face flushed, eyes burning. I looked like someone who'd just won something. Or maybe like someone who'd finally remembered she didn't have to surrender. The ruling came on a Thursday. I sat in the courtroom, palms cold against the wooden bench, while the judge's voice spilled across the room like warm molasses. I didn't catch every word. Something about intent, about marital cohabitation, about lack of enforceable claim. But I heard the only line that mattered. The court finds in favor of Mrs. Dalrymple. It didn't feel like triumph. Not right away. Just silence. As if even the building was waiting to see if Grace would burst in and object, screaming about broken promises and lavender ghosts. But she wasn't there. She hadn't shown up. Not that day. Not any of the hearings, actually. After the warning from the police, she vanished. No more letters, no visits, no flickers on the security cameras. Even Julia texted once, just a question mark and a heart, like she'd sensed it too. It was over. At least, the part that could be written on paper. Weeks passed. The leaves began to turn. I let myself take up space in the house again, played music in the kitchen, ate dinner at the actual table, instead of curled on the couch like a refugee from my own life. I even opened the bedroom windows on warm afternoons and let the breeze stir the curtains like they weren't dangerous anymore. Then, one morning, I did what I hadn't done since Paul died. I went upstairs. This time I didn't tiptoe. I didn't hesitate. I walked up like the house belonged to me, which it finally did, and opened the bedroom door without flinching. The room was still, curtains open, sunlight streaming in at the exact angle Paul always claimed was his favorite light. But the shadows no longer stretched menacing. They just sat where they were supposed to. I looked at the nightstand. The photo of Paul was there, but I'd removed the frame, peeled it open, cut her out. Now it was just him. He looked lonelier that way, smaller somehow, but truer, real. Like I'd stripped away the story he'd built and finally uncovered the man he actually was. Flawed, fearful, charming when it suited him, and deeply, disastrously good at lying. I whispered it into the room, because it felt like something that needed to be said aloud. You built this house with lies. Then I ran my fingers along the wall, traced the edges where the paint had faded. I'll live in it with truth. The next few days were spent with drop cloths and rollers. I painted over every inch of the room. Gone was the tired taupe Paul insisted was neutral. In its place, a clean, bright green, fresh, almost startling. I replaced the sheets with crisp linen, laid down a new rug, rehung the curtains, white, not grey. By the end of the week, the room felt like a place someone could sleep in again, not a tomb, not a stage set for a life that never really existed. Mine. On the night I finished, I stood in the doorway and took it all in. No ghosts, no flickers, just silence. And then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No contact. Just a message, 6 words long. She'll be back, you know that. I stared at it for a moment, waiting for the fear, the old shiver, but it didn't come. Instead, I smiled, grim, quiet. Let her try, I whispered, and powered off the phone. Then I turned out the light, walked downstairs and left the door wide open behind me.